few months with nothing, and I was thinking, I made a big mistake. And then the audition came up for this new show about the 50s called Happy Days, and I went back several times for more auditions, and then eventually a screen test.
Yeah.
And that was what led to me getting the part.
Yeah, and Don, Happy Days, as we know, revolves around the story of Richie Cunningham growing up in Wisconsin in the mid-1950s and 60s, and his daily dilemmas that he and his friends and family have to face. And the Cunninghams were the traditional all-American family you would see in any village or town of that time, and it really struck a chord with the TV viewer. And why do you think Happy Days has stood the test of time and can be watched for the first time even today and still be labelled as a cult classic that can reel in a new TV audience even in this generation?
Oh, that's an excellent question. At the time, a lot of people, when we first came on the air, a lot of people maybe attributed the success of the show to the fact that, well, it was nostalgia. Here we were in the 70s doing a show about the 50s, and people like to look back. Certainly it was a simpler time, and not as chaotic and a lot less stressful probably. So people looked at it as maybe as escape and fun nostalgia. But like you bringing up, it does stand the test of time. It did stand the test of time beyond that, and all these years later, many other generations have discovered it and really enjoy the show. So now, is there still a little bit of a fondness and a romanticism towards an earlier time, a simpler time? To some degree, I think maybe that still holds. But I think the other aspect of it was that it was a terrific cast, and it was very fortuitous bringing together of talent and personalities that just blended so well. And we had a great team on the other side of the camera, like Gary Marshall, who created the show, and Jerry Paris, a brilliant director, and then some great writers. So sometimes you catch that's some special magic, and those ingredients all added up to something that does stand the test of time.
Yeah, and I suppose, Don, in relation to Happy Days, you really set the benchmark for other TV series to come around. We know that 70s show is a real sort of replica of what Happy Days did in the 50s. That 70s shows did the same sort of, took the same sort of twist on it. But if I can take you back, maybe the first pilot, it wasn't really that successful, and for George Lucas, but the second pilot or the remake really hit the mark with ABC to run the first two seasons. But again, the first two seasons, even though it was making steadily progress, people were saying maybe it was coming to a tail, and then another twist was brought on the series, and Henry Winkler's character, Arthur Fonzarelli, became, from a bit part role, became a major sort of player, and there was a spike in Happy Days, and it became the number one program in TV in 1976 and 1977. And then the interaction between the three amigos, as we call it, Richie, Ron Howard, Potsy, Anselm Williams, and yourself, who you played Ralph with the Fonz, really brought a global audience to its knees laughing. It was sort of a new twist, the interaction with the three guys, the three teens, and Fonzie and that sort of character. It sort of developed, the show really took off from there.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a very valid point that the show, it was sort of a minor hit in the first year. It was doing well. The second season, it was the ratings were starting to go down, and there was some question as to whether the show would even be picked up for a third season. And around that time, the decision was made, and I know Jerry Paris was very influential. He felt, all the hot comedies at that time were shot in front of a live audience. And Happy Days, was a one-camera show, not shot in front of an audience. I'm not saying all of the comedies, but a lot of the ones, like All in the Family was very big then, and Maude, and he felt that we would do better, that we were a great cast to do in front of an audience. And then, so he was pushing for that, and then Fred Silverman at the time was, I think, the president at ABC, and I say, they were pushing. They saw how Henry's character Fonzie was really catching on, and they said, you got to push him up more to the front somehow. And then they came up with the idea of having him move into the Cunningham's garage, and then he became much more of a starring character as opposed to a supporting role. And then that, putting him in the spotlight like that, and then putting the show in front of an audience, and Gary brought in some other writers that he had been working with during the Odd Couple show that he had, and it really, they amped up, it amped up a different kind of energy, and a combination of all that did really spark it and catapult the show. And then, as you said, then the relationships between my character as well was a supporting character at the beginning, just like Henry. And then, but slowly it became more and more integral, and I became one of the guys. And then, it just sort of found a life of its own from that point forward.
Yeah, and Don, if maybe, I know this is going back a long, long time now, but if you could maybe recollect and give us talk me through the working week on Happy Days, from the time you received the script maybe on a Monday to the time the final shoot before a live audience, and especially you were going from a one camera show, maybe that first live audience show in January the 14th, 1975. How hectic was that?
Wow, yeah, it was pretty hectic and very exciting for us because, when we were shooting it as a one-camera show, it was very different. We were, you would just be doing, every day you'd be shooting different scenes, and the scenes would be out of order, and, you might come in at 6 in the morning, or you might come in at 2 in the afternoon, depending on what scenes they were shooting, and you didn't get much rehearsal time. Now, in that first week, and when it changed, when we did it in front of an audience, the schedule would be, the entire cast would assemble at 10 in the morning in a big room near the sound stage, and all the writers would be there and producers, and we would have a read-through of the script for that particular week. Then there'd be a short session afterwards where if there's anything major that people felt they needed to bring up, there'd be some discussion, and writers and actors. And then we were basically, then, I'm trying to remember because it's been a while, I think we might have done a little rehearsal, but not too much, because I think the writers would, make a lot of changes based on how that reading went. So then Tuesday is when we really started in earnest. We'd get in about 10 o'clock and with the director, and we would start staging all of the scenes on the sets, and rehearsing them. And then by the end of that day, 4 o'clock or so, we would have a run-through for the writers. And then it'd be a little discussion, and then the writers would go and do rewriting. As later that day in the early evening, and then so Wednesday we come in and there's all these new pages, or some of it was the same, some of it would be totally new, and some of it would be adjusted, and we would rehearse again with integrating all the changes and making sure our staging was good, and figuring out any problems that needed to be fixed.